Hello! Okay, so the purpose of this video is to explain to you how to manipulate expressions with absolute values. Okay, but first let's talk about what an absolute value is. Okay, so it's basically the distance measured between a certain number and zero. So, for example, let's say we chose any number, x equals 5, we can consider two things. So, we know that on a number line, -5 is 5 units away from 0. And we know 5 is 5 units away from 0. So you see these units here that are positive, that represents the absolute value. Okay? So it says when evaluated, an absolute value is always positive. So you can see here, we're only looking at the distance between -5 and 0 and 5 in this case. And an absolute value is written as two lines here. So you have two lines and then the x is in the middle. Okay, so this is called absolute value of x. So this here, the two lines in the x is a short way of saying the absolute value of x. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at here is, so the absolute value of any negative number, in this case if it's -5, is going to be +5. So in notation, this is written as absolute value of -5 is going to be +5. But if we took the absolute value of a positive number, the result is also going to be positive. So absolute value of 5 is 5. So if you have something like this, so that's going to equal 5. Okay, so in short, just like I mentioned earlier, the absolute value of a negative number is going to be positive, and the absolute value of a positive number is going to be positive. Okay, let's do some quick examples, just so hopefully we're all on the same page. Okay, so let's say I give you something like this, something like this, something like this. Let's see, we can do that, and that, and that. Okay. Let's say I ask you what the absolute value of -7 is. So like I mentioned earlier, the absolute value of a negative number is always going to be positive. So that's 7. Okay. The absolute value of a positive number is also going to return a positive number. So this is 4. Absolute value of a negative number is going to become positive. Absolute value of -3 is going to be +3. Absolute value of positive number, so 5, is going to be +5. Absolute value of -6, negative becomes positive. So this is 6. Absolute value of a positive number is positive. Okay, and that's 10. Some students have made the mistake where they say that the absolute value of a positive is going to be negative. So you want to be careful. Anytime you take the absolute value of a number, whether it's negative or positive, the result is going to be positive. So I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, so let's say I give you something a little more complicated. Okay, so let's say we wanted to solve the absolute value equation. Okay, so absolute value equation, and that's going to be given by, so I have this right here, the absolute value of 2x equals 3. Okay, so let's think about what we know about this 3 here. Okay, so we know that if the inside of this is -3, right? Look what we have here. The absolute value of -3 is going to be +3. Similarly, if this expression inside here was 3, the absolute value of 3 is going to be 3. So what this implies is we need to make two equations. So we have 2x equals -3 or 2x equals 3, right? Because we said the absolute value of -3 is 3 and the absolute value of 3 is 3. So what we're doing is we're setting the inside here. So you see, like that, and so forth like this. Okay? So that's basically what we're doing. And all we have to do to solve this absolute value equation is we need to solve for x. So, very easy. Divide by 2. X is -3/2. Or, and then we have this. We can divide by 2 and x is 3 over 2. Very simple. So x is negative 1.5 if you were to put in the decimal, and x is equal to positive 1.5. Okay, so that's your first basic example, right? Now we're gonna do another example. Okay, I'll see you later. Bye. All right. Okay, so let's do another example. So let's say we have the absolute value of x over 4 minus 2 equals 8. Okay, so similarly, just like I showed you earlier, first what we want to do is we want to look at what's in this absolute value expression, right? So what we know is if the inside is negative 8, we know that the absolute value of negative 8 is going to be 8. Similarly, if we took the absolute value of 8, a positive number, that's also going to be 8. So what we need to do in this case is we need to create two equations. So we have x over 4 minus 2 equals negative 8, and we have x over 4 minus 2 equals 8. And that's because, well, the absolute value of negative 8 is 8, and the absolute value of 8 is 8. So just like I showed you earlier, right? So this, if we set these pieces equal to each other, we can solve for x, right? And then if we set this piece equal to each other, we can also solve for x. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do that. So first what I see is we can add 2 to both sides. So we get x over 4 equals negative 8 plus 2 is going to be negative 6. Then what I see is we can get rid of the 4 in the denominator. So by doing so, we can multiply both sides by 4. Right? And then what's going to happen is the 4's cancel here, and we get x equals negative 6 times 4 is going to be negative 24. Okay? Now what we want to do is we want to manipulate the other equation. So we can add 2 to both sides. We get x over 4 equals 8 plus 2 is going to be 10. Okay, and same idea. Oops, ran out of room here. So what we want to do is we need to manipulate that 4. So multiply both sides by 4 here. So that cancels, and we get x equals 10 times 4, and that's 40. And that's it. Okay, so that's basically how you would do something like that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you another example. Hopefully you guys will start to see a pattern after we go through all of these examples. Okay, so next one I have for you guys, it looks something like this. So we have 8 times the absolute value of negative x plus 3 plus 6 equals 22. Okay, so our goal is we want to solve this absolute value equation. Okay, so now that we have something like this now, this kind of, like that idea earlier when we had to isolate a radical or square root from the other lesson, this time we have to isolate the absolute value expression before we manipulate. So we want something like this, as you can see above, before we go ahead and try to solve. So what I see is we can first subtract 6 to both sides. Let me put that in a different color. Okay, we can subtract 6 to both sides because our goal is, well, we can try to isolate this and then try to manipulate the 8 after. Okay, so we have 8 times the absolute value of negative x plus 3 equals 22 minus 6 is going to be 16. Okay, this 8 is on the outside here. So what we can do is we can divide by 8. So when we divide by 8 here, this is the absolute value of negative x plus 3 equals 16 divided by 8, and that is 2. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, now let's think about this situation, right? So this inside here, this has to be negative 2, right? So the absolute value of negative 2 is going to be positive 2. And similarly, if the inside is positive 2, we're also going to get a positive 2. Okay? So when we write this, we have two possible equations to consider. So we have negative x plus 3 equals 2, or we get negative x plus 3 equals negative 2, because the absolute value of negative 2 is 2, and the absolute value of 2 is 2. Okay, so now let's go ahead and try to solve for x. So I can subtract 3 on both sides. Negative x equals negative 1. Divide by negative 1 to get rid of the negative 1. And then we get x equals positive 1. Then what I see here is we can go ahead and subtract 3 on both sides. for this one, we get negative x equals negative 5. And then the negatives just cancel each other out if we divide by negative 1. And then, yeah, what we're left with is we have x equals, so negative 5 divided by negative 1 is going to be positive 5. Okay? And that's basically how you would do that one. Okay? I have one more example, and then that closes this video. And I'll see you later. Okay, bye. Hello. All right, final problem. Okay, let's try to think about what we need to do here. So, same idea, like I said earlier, we want to try to isolate this absolute value expression somehow. Okay, so first what I see is we can get rid of the negative 3, we can add 3 to both sides. And what we get is this is going to cancel, and actually this is going to cancel. So what we're left with is we have 5 times the absolute value of 2x plus 4 equals 0, because negative 3 plus 3 is going to be 0. Okay. Now what I see is we have a 5 on the outside. So since we have a 5 on the outside, and our goal is to isolate this absolute value expression, basically what we're going to do is we're going to divide by 5. So that cancels, and we get the absolute value of 2x plus 4 equals 0. Okay? And now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and try to manipulate this. So if you think about it, right, well, the inside here, it has to be negative 0, well, that's 0, or 0. So for this special case here, this actually means all we have to do is we have 2x plus 4 equals 0. We don't have two possibilities in this case, because if we consider the negative and positive, well, it's still 0. Okay? So now we just solve for x. So subtract 4. 2x equals negative 4. Divide by 2. And we get x equals negative 2. Right? And that is it. Okay? Please let me know if you have any questions on this. Okay? Bye-bye.